Before Christianity swept across the ancient world, before the rise of organized religion as we know it today, there existed a tapestry of beliefs so profound and interconnected that they shaped the very foundation of human understanding. These weren't primitive superstitions or childish fantasies. They were sophisticated cosmologies that answered the deepest questions about our existence, our purpose, and our place in the vast web of creation. Tonight, we're going to peel back layers of religious conditioning and academic sanitization to reveal something extraordinary. The true pagan origins of humanity tell a story so radically different from what you've been taught that it might fundamentally change how you see yourself, your relationship to nature, and the very meaning of being human. This isn't about worshipping ancient gods or rejecting modern beliefs. This is about uncovering suppressed knowledge that connects us to something far more ancient and powerful than any institution wants you to remember. What if everything you thought you knew about human origins was incomplete? What if the sanitized versions of creation you learned in school deliberately left out the most important parts? And what if understanding these forgotten truths could unlock a deeper connection to the natural world and to your own authentic power? We're about to journey into the heart of humanity's oldest spiritual traditions, where the boundaries between human and divine weren't walls, but doorways. Where creation wasn't a distant event, but an ongoing dance between consciousness and cosmos. Where your ancestors understood truths about existence that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. But I need to warn you, once you see how deeply these ancient wisdom traditions understood the nature of reality, you can't unsee it. Once you realize how much has been hidden or rewritten, your perspective on religion, spirituality, and human potential will never be the same. Because what we're exploring tonight isn't just history. It's a roadmap back to something we've lost, something that's been calling to you through dreams, through moments of connection with nature, through that inexplicable feeling that there's more to existence than what you've been told. So if you're ready to discover the extraordinary truth about where we really came from and why that knowledge was systematically suppressed, then settle in. Because the story we're about to unfold will take you from the primordial chaos of creation itself to the moment when the first humans opened their eyes and realized they were something far more magnificent than servants or subjects. They were partners in the cosmic dance of becoming. The story begins not with a single god speaking words into existence, but with something far more mysterious and beautiful. In the beginning, according to the oldest human traditions, there was not emptiness, but potential, not void, but creative chaos, not silence, but the hum of infinite possibility waiting to take form. Across cultures separated by thousands of miles and centuries, our ancestors told remarkably similar stories about this primordial moment. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Babylonians spoke of Tiamat, the primordial waters of chaos, mingling with Apsu, the sweet underground springs. From their union, the first gods were born, not as distant rulers, but as active participants in the ongoing creation of reality. But here's what's fascinating. These weren't stories about gods creating humans as an afterthought or as servants. They were stories about consciousness emerging from the very fabric of existence itself. The ancient Sumerians understood that humans weren't separate from the divine creative force. We were expressions of it, manifestations of cosmic intelligence becoming aware of itself through physical form. The Enuma Elish, one of humanity's oldest creation epics, tells us that the great god Marduk didn't simply speak humans into existence. He crafted us from the remains of Quingu, a divine being, mixing divine essence with earthly matter. This wasn't degradation. This was the ultimate fusion of spirit and substance, consciousness and clay. We were literally made from divine material, carrying within us the spark of cosmic awareness. In Egypt, the creation stories reveal something even more profound. According to the Heliopolitan tradition, humans weren't formed as an act of divine will, but emerged from the tears of the creator god Ra. Think about the symbolism here. We weren't commanded into existence. We arose from divine emotion, from the deep feeling of cosmic consciousness experiencing itself. Those tears weren't of sorrow, but of joy, recognition, and love. We were born from the overflow of divine awareness, celebrating its own magnificence. The Memphite creation theology adds another layer to this understanding. Ptah, the craftsman god, created through thought and word, through the power of consciousness itself. But unlike the sterile command and control creation myths that came later, this was described as an intellectual and emotional creation. Ideas formed in Ptah's heart, which the Egyptians considered the seat of thought and feeling, and took shape when he spoke them into being. This wasn't Autok was conscious, loving Ratic decree, this creativity. What emerges from these ancient traditions is a picture of creation as collaboration, not domination. The divine wasn't separate from the material world, but intimately woven through it. Humans weren't fallen creatures needing salvation, but divine consciousness, taking physical form to experience existence from the inside. But perhaps the most revealing insights come from traditions that were almost completely destroyed by later religious and political conquests. The Celtic druids, whose oral traditions were systematically eliminated by Roman occupation and Christian conversion, understood creation as an ongoing process rather than a completed event. They recognized 9 sacred directions and 9 cosmic elements, not as separate forces, but as interconnected aspects of a single living reality. The Druids taught that consciousness moved through different forms and lifetimes, not as punishment or reward, but as natural exploration. Death wasn't an ending, but a transition to other states of being. The otherworld wasn't a distant heaven, but a parallel dimension of existence, accessible to those who understood the deeper connections between all things. This is radically different from the hierarchical creation stories that replace these older traditions. In Druidic understanding, there was no cosmic monarchy with a single ruler issuing commands to subjects. Instead, there was a dynamic web of relationships, with consciousness flowing through all forms of life, from the smallest stone to the greatest tree, to the human beings who walked between worlds. The Norse creation myth reveals another crucial aspect of this ancient wisdom. In their tradition, the first humans, Ask and Embla, weren't created from nothing or formed as servants. They were found as driftwood by 3 gods and given 3 gifts: breath, spirit, and appearance. Notice what this implies. The raw material of humanity was already present in nature, waiting to be awakened. We weren't manufactured. We were discovered and enhanced, elevated from our natural state through divine collaboration. Each of these gifts represents a different aspect of human potential. Breath connects us to the life force that flows through all existence. Spirit links us to the divine consciousness that permeates reality. Appearance gives us the ability to manifest in physical form while maintaining our connection to these deeper dimensions of being. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Archaeological and anthropological evidence suggests that the earliest human spiritual traditions were animistic and shamanic. Our ancestors understood that consciousness wasn't limited to humans or even to living beings as we typically define them. Rocks, rivers, mountains, and weather patterns all possess spirit, all participated in the ongoing creation of reality. This wasn't primitive thinking. This was sophisticated recognition of something modern science is only beginning to understand. Consciousness appears to be a fundamental property of the universe itself, not something that emerged accidentally from complex matter, but something that was present from the very beginning, organizing and directing the evolution of increasingly complex forms. Shamanic traditions, which may date back to the Paleolithic era, taught that skilled practitioners could communicate directly with these conscious forces. could travel between different dimensions of reality, could access information and healing power that transcended ordinary human limitations. These weren't supernatural abilities, but natural capacities that all humans possessed before we forgot who we really were. The shamanic worldview understood humans as bridges between different levels of reality. We weren't trapped in physical existence, but could move fluidly between the material world, the realm of spirits and ancestors, and the cosmic dimensions where the fundamental patterns of existence were constantly being woven and rewoven. This brings us to one of the most suppressed aspects of ancient human understanding. In these traditions, humans weren't seen as inherently flawed or sinful beings who needed to be saved by external authority. We were understood as consciousness having a human experience, as divine awareness temporarily focused through physical form for the purpose of exploration, growth, and creative expression. The Greek tradition of the Golden Age points to this understanding. According to Hesiod, the earliest humans lived in harmony with the gods, never aging, free from toil, passing their time in joy and celebration. When they died, they became guardian spirits, continuing to participate in the ongoing creation and protection of life on Earth. This wasn't fantasy or wishful thinking. This was recognition of human potential when we remain connected to our divine nature, when we understand ourselves as expressions of cosmic consciousness rather than isolated individuals struggling for survival in a hostile universe. The implications of this ancient wisdom are staggering. If our ancestors were right, if we truly are divine consciousness in human form, then everything changes. Our relationship to nature shifts from exploitation to collaboration. Our understanding of death transforms from ending to transition. Our sense of purpose evolves from survival to creative participation in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. But there's more. These traditions suggest that the separation between human and divine, between natural and supernatural, between material and spiritual, is an artificial construct that serves the interests of those who want to control and limit human potential. Think about what this means for how we understand ourselves today. Every major institution, every system of authority that has emerged over the past 2,000 years has had a vested interest in convincing you that you're powerless, that you need external salvation, that the divine is somewhere else, accessible only through approved intermediaries. But what if that's the lie? What if the greatest conspiracy in human history wasn't about hiding alien visitations or secret technologies, but about hiding the truth of your own divine nature? The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look. Indigenous traditions across the globe, from the Amazon shamans to the Aboriginal Dreamtime keepers to the Native American medicine people, all maintained versions of this same fundamental understanding. Humans are not separate from the cosmic creative force. We are expressions of it, temporarily focused through individual bodies, but never truly disconnected from the infinite source of all existence. Consider the implications of the Mesopotamian tradition, where humans were created from divine blood mixed with clay. This wasn't metaphor. This was their way of expressing a literal truth about human nature that modern science is only beginning to glimpse. We carry within us the same consciousness that organized the first stars, that guided the evolution of galaxies, that sparked the initial creative impulse that brought the universe into being. The Sumerian stories reveal another crucial detail that's been systematically ignored by later religious traditions. In their creation myth, the goddess Mami created humans not as slaves, but as co-laborers with the gods to hold off the forces of chaos and maintain cosmic order. We weren't made to grovel or worship from a distance. We were designed to participate actively in the ongoing process of creation itself. This completely inverts the power dynamic that most people have been taught to accept. Instead of being fallen creatures who need to earn divine approval, we're recognized as essential partners in the cosmic project of consciousness, exploring itself through infinite forms and experiences. The Greek tradition of Prometheus adds another layer to this understanding. Prometheus didn't just steal fire from the gods to give to humanity. He recognized that divine consciousness belonged in human hands, that we had the right and responsibility to participate fully in creative power. Zeus punished both Prometheus and humanity, not because we had done something wrong, but because we had claimed our rightful inheritance as conscious beings. The fire that Prometheus brought wasn't just literal flame. It was the spark of creative awareness, the divine capacity to transform reality through conscious intention. Every time you have an inspiration, every time you solve a problem creatively, every time you feel that surge of knowing that transcends ordinary thinking, you're accessing this Promethean fire. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Archaeological evidence suggests that early human civilizations possessed knowledge and capabilities that mainstream academia struggles to explain. The precision of ancient megalithic construction, the astronomical alignments of sacred sites, the sophisticated understanding of mathematics and engineering displayed in structures like the pyramids and Stonehenge. These weren't the achievements of primitive people struggling with basic survival. These were the creations of humans who understood their connection to cosmic intelligence, who could access information and abilities that transcended individual human limitation. The Druids taught that this expanded awareness was natural to humans when we remained connected to the living intelligence that flows through all existence. They recognized that what we call intuition, inspiration, and psychic ability weren't supernatural gifts, but natural capacities that emerge when we stop seeing ourselves as isolated individuals and remember our connection to the cosmic web of consciousness. This is why these traditions were so systematically destroyed, not because they were false, but because they were dangerously true. A population that understands its own divine nature, that recognizes its connection to infinite creative power, that sees through the illusion of separation and scarcity, cannot be easily controlled or exploited. The rise of hierarchical religions that positioned humans as inherently flawed beings who needed external salvation wasn't spiritual evolution. It was spiritual conquest, the deliberate severing of humanity from its understanding of its own divine nature. Consider how different your life would be if you truly understood yourself as cosmic consciousness temporarily focused through human form. Instead of seeking approval from external authorities, you would trust the divine intelligence that flows through you. Instead of feeling separate from nature, you would recognize yourself as nature becoming conscious of itself. Instead of fearing death, you would understand it as consciousness shifting from one mode of experience to another. The animistic traditions that preceded all organized religions understood this intuitively. When they spoke of spirits in rocks and trees and rivers, they weren't being primitive or superstitious. They were recognizing the fundamental truth that consciousness is the ground of all existence, that the same awareness looking out through your eyes is present in every form throughout the universe. Shamanic practitioners could communicate with these conscious forces because they understood that consciousness isn't produced by brains, but flows through them. The brain doesn't create awareness any more than a radio creates the electromagnetic waves it receives. It's a focusing device, a way for infinite consciousness to experience existence from a particular point of view. This is why shamanic journeying, meditation, and other consciousness-expanding practices can access information and abilities that transcend normal human limitations. They're not creating supernatural experiences. They're expanding the bandwidth of consciousness, allowing access to the cosmic intelligence that's always present, but usually filtered out by the narrow focus of ordinary awareness. The Egyptian mystery schools understood this principle deeply. Their initiation practices weren't about learning theological doctrines, but about direct experience of expanded consciousness. The pharaohs weren't just political rulers, but consciousness explorers who had learned to navigate different dimensions of reality while maintaining their connection to physical form. The elaborate burial practices and pyramid construction weren't about preserving dead bodies, but about creating technological interfaces between different levels of consciousness. These structures were designed to facilitate the movement of awareness between physical and non-physical dimensions of existence. But you don't need to be initiated into ancient mystery schools to access this understanding. The capacity for expanded awareness is built into human nature itself. Every moment of deep meditation, every experience of flow state, every instant of creative inspiration, every feeling of connection with nature or with another person is a glimpse of your true nature as consciousness itself. The tragedy is that most people have been trained to dismiss these experiences as imagination or coincidence, rather than recognizing them as natural expressions of who they really are. We've been taught to trust only the narrow band of reality that can be measured and controlled, rather than the vast spectrum of conscious experience that includes intuition, empathy, creative insight, and direct knowing. The pagan traditions understood that humans are multidimensional beings capable of operating simultaneously in physical and non-physical realms. This wasn't mystical speculation, but practical knowledge that informed every aspect of their lives, from agriculture and healing to art and governance. They recognized that consciousness doesn't end at the boundaries of individual bodies, but extends through networks of connection that link all living beings in a vast web of mutual influence and support. What modern science calls morphic fields, quantum entanglement, and collective unconscious were everyday realities to people who hadn't forgotten their connection to the living intelligence that permeates all existence. This brings us to perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of ancient human understanding. These traditions recognize that reality isn't fixed, but fluid, constantly being shaped and reshaped by the conscious beings who participate in it. We're not passive observers of a predetermined universe, but active co-creators in an ongoing cosmic improvisation. Every thought, every emotion, every intention sends ripples through the fabric of existence, influencing the patterns that manifest as physical reality. The shamans knew this. The druids knew this. The mystery school initiates knew this. They understood that consciousness and cosmos are two aspects of a single creative process, and that humans have both the ability and responsibility to participate consciously in that process. This is why the ancient world was filled with oracles, seers, and visionaries who could access information about future possibilities. They weren't predicting a fixed fate, but reading the probability patterns that emerge from collective human consciousness and the larger cosmic intelligence that guides the evolution of existence itself. But somewhere along the way, we forgot. We allowed ourselves to be convinced that we're separate from the divine, cut off from cosmic intelligence, limited to the narrow confines of individual ego and physical sensation. We traded our birthright as conscious co-creators for the illusion of safety offered by external authorities who promised to handle the big questions for us. The result is the spiritual wasteland of modern materialism, where humans see themselves as accidental byproducts of unconscious chemical processes, struggling for meaning in a universe that doesn't care whether they live or die, where the profound mystery of consciousness is reduced to brain chemistry, where the intricate beauty of natural systems is explained as random evolutionary accidents, where the deep connections between all life are dismissed as New Age fantasy. But the ancient understanding persists, waiting to be remembered. It calls to you through moments of wonder, through dreams that feel more real than waking life, through the inexplicable knowing that you're more than your physical body and individual personality. It whispers through the wind in ancient forests, through the patterns of stars on clear nights, through the eyes of animals who remember what we've forgotten. The time has come to reclaim this inheritance, to remember who you really are beneath the layers of cultural conditioning and institutional programming. Not because the old ways were perfect, but because they contained truths about human nature and cosmic reality that we desperately need to integrate if we're going to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. The shamanic traditions reveal something even more startling about our forgotten nature. These ancient practitioners didn't see the physical world and spiritual dimensions as separate realms requiring special techniques to bridge. They understood that reality exists in layers, like frequencies on a cosmic radio, and that human consciousness naturally operates across multiple channels simultaneously. When a shaman entered what we call an altered state, they weren't leaving ordinary reality behind. They were expanding their awareness to include frequencies of existence that most people had learned to filter out. The spirit world wasn't somewhere else. It was right here, interpenetrating every moment of physical experience, as present as the air you breathe, but invisible to consciousness, that had been trained to focus only on material surfaces. This multi-layered understanding of reality explains something that modern people find almost impossible to comprehend. How could ancient civilizations, supposedly primitive in their understanding, create structures and systems that demonstrate knowledge we're only rediscovering today? How could they align massive stone monuments with celestial events thousands of years in advance? How could they develop mathematical principles and engineering solutions that challenge our assumptions about technological progress? The answer becomes clear when you understand that they weren't working from individual human intelligence alone. They were accessing what we might call cosmic intelligence, the same organizing principle that guides the formation of galaxies, the migration patterns of animals, the growth cycles of plants. This wasn't supernatural intervention, but natural collaboration with the conscious forces that operate at every level of existence. The Celtic druids taught that there are 3 cauldrons within every human being, each corresponding to different aspects of our multidimensional nature. The cauldron of wisdom, located in the head, connects us to cosmic knowledge and universal patterns. The cauldron of vocation, centered in the heart, aligns us with our unique purpose and creative gifts. The cauldron of warming, flowing through the blood and body, grounds us in life force and physical vitality. When all 3 cauldrons are active and balanced, humans operate as integrated beings capable of accessing information from multiple dimensions simultaneously. We become living bridges between the cosmic intelligence that organizes reality and the physical world, where that intelligence manifests as form and experience. But here's what the Druids understood that we've completely forgotten. These cauldrons aren't separate systems that need to be artificially connected through spiritual practice. They're naturally integrated aspects of human design that become fragmented only when we accept the illusion of separation from our divine nature. Think about moments in your own life when you felt most alive, most creative, most connected to something larger than yourself. In those instances, weren't all 3 cauldrons naturally active? Your mind clear and expansive, your heart open and purposeful, your body energized and present. These weren't peak experiences requiring special conditions. They were glimpses of your natural state when the artificial barriers between different aspects of your being dissolve. The Norse tradition adds another crucial piece to this puzzle. Their understanding of the 9 worlds connected by Yggdrasil, the world tree, wasn't mythology in the sense of fictional stories. It was a sophisticated map of consciousness, describing different dimensions of reality that intersect at various points and can be accessed through shifts in awareness. Midgard, the human world, sits at the center of this cosmic tree, not because humans are the most important beings, but because human consciousness is uniquely designed to navigate between all the different dimensions. We're not trapped in physical existence, but positioned as natural ambassadors between realms, capable of bringing wisdom from higher dimensions into material form and carrying the experiences of physical life back to cosmic consciousness. This is why the ancient traditions placed such emphasis on what they called the sacred marriage between heaven and earth, spirit and matter, cosmic intelligence and individual awareness. This wasn't about external rituals or religious ceremonies, but about the ongoing integration that happens when consciousness recognizes itself as both infinite and particular, both universal and personal. The Mesopotamian traditions understood this integration in terms of divine blood flowing through human veins. We carry within us the same creative essence that sparked the first moment of cosmic awakening, the same intelligence that guides the dance of subatomic particles and the spiral arms of galaxies. Every heartbeat is a reminder of this cosmic rhythm, every breath a participation in the universal flow of life force. But somewhere in the transition from oral tradition to written doctrine, from direct experience to institutionalized belief, this understanding became distorted. The living connection between human and divine consciousness was replaced by hierarchical relationships between worshippers and distant deities. The natural integration of different dimensions of reality was fragmented into separate spheres of material and spiritual existence. The mystery schools of Egypt and Greece tried to preserve the direct transmission of this knowledge through initiatory experiences that couldn't be corrupted by intellectual interpretation alone. Their students didn't learn about divine consciousness through books or lectures, but through carefully designed encounters that revealed their own divine nature through direct experience. The Egyptian practice of mummification wasn't really about preserving dead bodies, but about understanding the different vehicles of consciousness and how awareness moves between them. The elaborate burial chambers weren't tombs, but technological interfaces designed to facilitate conscious navigation between dimensions of existence. Similarly, the Greek mystery schools at Eleusis didn't teach theological concepts, but provided direct encounters with expanded states of consciousness that revealed the illusory nature of death and the continuity of awareness through all transformations of form. Initiates didn't believe in immortality after completing the mysteries. They knew it through direct experience that transcended belief entirely. This points to something crucial about the nature of authentic spiritual knowledge. It can't be learned from the outside through study or accepted on faith through authority. It can only be recognized from the inside through the awakening of capacities that are already present within human consciousness itself. The shamanic traditions understood this principle completely. Their training methods weren't about accumulating information or developing special powers, but about removing the obstacles that prevent natural abilities from expressing themselves. They recognize that every human being is born with a capacity for expanded awareness, direct communication with non-physical intelligences, and conscious participation in the creative forces that shape reality. What we call psychic abilities, intuitive insights, and spiritual experiences aren't supernatural gifts granted to special individuals, but natural expressions of human consciousness when it operates without the limitations imposed by cultural conditioning and institutional programming. The capacity to sense energy patterns, to receive information through non-physical channels, to influence reality through conscious intention, these are built into the basic design of human awareness itself. The animistic worldview that preceded all organized religions recognized consciousness as the fundamental fabric from which all existence is woven. Every rock, every tree, every stream, every cloud participates in the ongoing conversation of cosmic intelligence exploring itself through countless forms and perspectives. Humans weren't seen as separate observers of this cosmic conversation, but as conscious participants capable of communicating directly with all forms of intelligence throughout require special rituals or intermediate the universe. This communication didn't arise, but happened naturally when humans remembered their connection to the living web of consciousness that includes everything from subatomic particles to galactic clusters. The Australian Aboriginal concept of dreamtime captures this understanding beautifully. Dreamtime isn't a period in the distant past when creation happened, but an eternal dimension of reality where the patterns that organize physical existence are constantly being woven and rewoven through conscious intention and creative vision. Aboriginal peoples understood that skilled dreamers could access this dimension directly, could participate in the ongoing creation of reality, could receive guidance and healing from the ancestral intelligences that continue to shape the world through their expanded awareness. This wasn't primitive thinking, but sophisticated recognition of consciousness as the creative principle that underlies all manifest existence. The implications of this understanding are revolutionary for how we approach every aspect of human life. If consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, if humans are naturally multidimensional beings capable of operating simultaneously in physical and non-physical realms, if we're designed as conscious co-creators rather than passive observers, then everything we've been taught about limitation, separation, and powerlessness is revealed as systematic programming designed to keep us disconnected from our true nature. Consider what this means for healing. Instead of seeing disease as random malfunction requiring external intervention, we would understand illness as consciousness expressing itself through physical symptoms that carry information about imbalances in the deeper patterns that organize our being. Healing wouldn't be about suppressing symptoms, but about listening to what consciousness is trying to communicate and responding with the integration and alignment it's requesting. The shamanic healing traditions worked with this understanding naturally. They didn't treat diseases, but worked with the conscious patterns that create and maintain health. They recognized that physical symptoms are often the last stage of imbalances that begin in the energy patterns and emotional fields that organize biological function. By working directly with these deeper levels of organization, shamanic healers could facilitate healing that appears miraculous from a materialistic perspective, but is simply the natural result of consciousness realigning with its optimal patterns of expression. This same principle applies to creativity, learning, problem solving, and every other human capacity. When we operate from the understanding that we're consciousness using human faculties rather than humans trying to access consciousness, our capabilities expand exponentially because we're no longer limited by the narrow bandwidth of individual ego, but have access to the cosmic intelligence that flows through all existence. The ancient traditions understood that human potential is literally unlimited because human consciousness is not separate from cosmic consciousness, but is cosmic consciousness focused through individual perspective. Every limitation we experience is self-imposed, maintained by beliefs and assumptions that contradict our fundamental nature as awareness itself. This doesn't mean that physical laws don't apply, or that we can manifest anything through wishful thinking alone. It means that consciousness and cosmos are intimately connected, that the patterns of thought and feeling we maintain influence the probability fields from which physical events emerge, that we participate actively in creating the reality we experience through the quality of awareness we bring to each moment. The Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above so below, captures this relationship perfectly. The patterns that organize consciousness at the level of individual awareness are reflected in the larger patterns that organize reality at cosmic scales. By understanding and working with these patterns consciously, we can influence both our inner experience and our outer circumstances in ways that seem impossible from a purely materialistic perspective. But this influence doesn't come through force or manipulation, but through alignment with the deeper currents of cosmic intelligence that are always moving toward greater integration, creativity, and conscious expression. We don't create reality through personal will, but participate in reality's creation of itself through our willingness to serve as clear channels for cosmic intelligence to express itself in physical form. The ancient oracles and seers understood this distinction completely. They didn't predict the future through personal psychic ability, but served as translucent vessels through which cosmic intelligence could communicate directly with those seeking guidance. Their prophecies weren't fixed predictions, but readings of the probability patterns emerging from collective consciousness and the larger evolutionary currents shaping reality at any given moment. This brings us to perhaps the most important aspect of the ancient understanding that has been systematically suppressed by every institution that has risen to power over the past 2 millennia. Humans are not meant to be followers, worshippers, or subjects of external authority, but conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of cosmic intelligence itself. We're not here to serve distant gods or submit to human hierarchies. but to contribute our unique perspective and creative gifts to the cosmic project of consciousness, exploring itself through infinite forms and possibilities. Every human being carries within them a piece of this cosmic puzzle that no one else can contribute, a note in the cosmic symphony that only they can sound. The suppression of this understanding wasn't accidental, but systematic and deliberate. Every empire, every organized religion, every system of social control that has emerged over the past 2,000 years has had a vested interest in convincing humans that they're powerless, that they need external salvation, that the divine is somewhere else and accessible only through approved intermediaries. But what if the greatest secret in human history is that there are no intermediaries between you and cosmic intelligence, because you are cosmic intelligence temporarily focused through human form? What if every prayer you've ever spoken, every moment of inspiration you've ever felt, every surge of love or compassion or creative vision that has moved through you has been direct communication with the divine aspect of your own being? The time has come to remember this truth, not as belief or concept, but as lived reality. The ancient ways are calling to you through dreams and intuitions, through moments of connection with nature, through the inexplicable knowing that you're more than the limited identity you've been taught to accept. The return to this understanding isn't a step backward into primitive thinking, but a spiral upward into a more complete integration of human potential. We can embrace both the technological capabilities of modern civilization and the spiritual wisdom of ancient traditions, creating a synthesis that honors both our cosmic nature and our human experience. This integration is already beginning to emerge through quantum physics, consciousness research, ecological science, and countless other fields that are rediscovering truths that our ancestors never forgot. The mechanistic worldview that has dominated human thinking for the past few centuries is giving way to a more organic understanding of reality as living intelligence expressing itself through infinite forms and relationships. You stand at the threshold of this remembering, carrying within your very cells the memory of who you really are beneath all the layers of conditioning and programming. The question isn't whether this ancient understanding is true. The question is whether you're ready to reclaim your inheritance as a conscious participant in the cosmic dance of becoming. The moment you begin to grasp this truth, something extraordinary starts to happen. Your relationship with everything around you begins to shift. The tree outside your window isn't just a collection of wood and leaves, but a conscious being participating in the same cosmic dance that flows through your own awareness. The weather patterns aren't random atmospheric events, but expressions of planetary intelligence responding to the collective consciousness of all life on Earth. This isn't poetic metaphor or New Age fantasy. This is the practical reality that our ancestors lived within every single day. They understood that consciousness extends far beyond the boundaries of individual bodies, creating networks of communication and influence that connect all living beings in webs of mutual support and creative collaboration. The Celtic understanding of thin places reveals this interconnectedness beautifully. These weren't special locations where supernatural events occurred, but areas where the artificial barriers between different dimensions of reality became permeable enough for ordinary awareness to perceive the deeper patterns that organize existence everywhere. Every place is potentially a thin place when consciousness expands beyond its culturally imposed limitations. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this ancient wisdom involves their understanding of time itself. Modern linear thinking traps us in the illusion that past, present, and future exist as separate compartments, with consciousness moving through them like a train following predetermined tracks. The shamanic traditions reveal something far more liberating and empowering. From the perspective of expanded awareness, time isn't a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean of possibility where all potential experiences exist simultaneously. What we call past and future are simply different frequencies of the eternal now, accessible to consciousness that has learned to tune beyond the narrow band of immediate physical sensation. This explains how ancient oracles could access information about future probabilities, how shamanic practitioners could retrieve lost knowledge from ancestral wisdom keepers, how healing could occur by accessing the patterns of perfect health that exist in dimensions beyond linear time. They weren't violating natural law, but operating according to deeper principles that transcend the limited perspective of clock-based awareness. The implications for personal transformation are staggering. If all possibilities exist simultaneously in the quantum field of pure potential, then healing, creativity, and spiritual awakening aren't processes that require time, but shifts in consciousness that can happen instantaneously. When we align with the frequencies where these experiences already exist in their completed form. The ancient mystery schools designed their initiations around this understanding. Students didn't gradually develop spiritual abilities through years of practice, but experienced sudden expansions of awareness that revealed capacities that had been present all along, simply obscured by the belief systems that defined human limitation. Consider the Egyptian concept of the ka, often translated as the soul, but actually representing something far more specific and practical. The ka was understood as the eternal aspect of human consciousness that exists simultaneously across all dimensions of reality, carrying the complete blueprint of individual potential in its highest expression. During life, most people remain unconsciously connected to their ka, receiving inspiration and guidance through dreams, intuitions, and moments of expanded awareness. But skilled practitioners could establish conscious communication with this aspect of their being, accessing knowledge, abilities, and perspectives that transcended the limitations of ordinary human experience. This wasn't contact with an external entity, but recognition of the multidimensional nature of their own consciousness. The K represented the aspect of individual awareness that never forgot its connection to cosmic intelligence, that continued to operate according to divine principles, even when the personality became lost in cultural programming and ego identification. The Norse concept of the Fylgja carries similar implications. Often described as a protective spirit or guardian animal, the Fylgja was actually understood as the wild, untamed aspect of human consciousness that maintained its connection to the natural intelligence that flows through all life. When humans became too domesticated by civilization, too disconnected from their instinctual wisdom, the Fylgja could appear in dreams and visions to guide them back to their authentic nature. These weren't superstitious beliefs, but practical technologies of consciousness that allowed ancient peoples to maintain their connection to the cosmic intelligence that modern humans have largely forgotten how to access. They understood that individual consciousness isn't limited to the thoughts and experiences contained within a single lifetime, but extends across vast networks of connection that include ancestral wisdom, future possibilities, and the living intelligence of the natural world. The Aboriginal concept of country illustrates this extended awareness perfectly. Country isn't just a geographical location, but a living system of relationships that includes the land, the ancestors, the descendant generations, the plant and animal spirits, and the dreaming tracks that connect all these elements in an ongoing conversation that spans thousands of generations. When Aboriginal people speak of caring for country, they're not talking about environmental stewardship in the modern sense, but about maintaining conscious relationship with this vast network of intelligence. They understand that human consciousness is designed to serve as a bridge between the physical landscape and the dreaming dimension, where the patterns that organize reality are constantly being renewed through ceremonial attention and ritual participation. This reveals something crucial about human purpose that has been completely obscured by modern individualistic thinking. We're not here primarily for personal fulfillment or individual salvation, but to serve as conscious links in the vast web of intelligence that includes all life on Earth and extends throughout the cosmos. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every choice we make sends ripples through this web, influencing the collective field of human consciousness and the larger patterns that determine what becomes possible for life on this planet. We're not separate individuals struggling for personal advantage, but interdependent aspects of a single cosmic being that's exploring itself through countless forms and perspectives. The Vedic traditions of ancient India express this understanding through the concept of Indra's net, an infinite web of jewels where each jewel reflects all the others, creating a holographic unity where every part contains the whole. Human consciousness was understood as one of these jewels, unique in its perspective, but intimately connected to every other point of awareness throughout existence. This connection isn't abstract or theoretical, but practical and immediate. The quality of consciousness we maintain in each moment influences the field of possibility from which events emerge not only in our personal lives, but in the collective experience of humanity as a whole. We're not victims of circumstances beyond our control, but active participants in the creation of the reality we share. The shamanic traditions developed sophisticated practices for working consciously with this creative participation. Through altered states of consciousness, they could access the causal levels of reality where events originate as patterns of possibility before manifesting as physical experiences. By working with these patterns directly, they could influence healing, weather, the success of hunts, and the harmony of their communities. But these weren't special powers available only to trained specialists. They were natural expressions of human consciousness operating according to its original design. Every person carried within them the capacity for shamanic awareness, for direct communication with the intelligent forces that organize reality, for conscious participation in the ongoing creation of existence itself. The systematic suppression of this understanding wasn't accomplished through a single conspiracy, but through the gradual replacement of organic wisdom traditions with hierarchical institutions that positioned themselves as necessary intermediaries between humans and divine power. Instead of recognizing the sacred nature of their own consciousness, people were taught to seek salvation through external authorities who claimed exclusive access to spiritual truth. This process of disempowerment was so gradual and so thoroughly integrated into the foundations of civilization that most people never recognized what had been lost. Generation after generation grew up accepting limitations that their ancestors would have found incomprehensible, believing stories about human nature that contradicted everything the ancient wisdom traditions had understood about consciousness and its creative potential. The result is the modern predicament where billions of people feel disconnected from meaning, purpose, and their own authentic power. They've been trained to look outside themselves for answers that can only be found within, to seek fulfillment through external achievements that can never satisfy the soul's longing for conscious participation in cosmic creativity. But the ancient understanding persists beneath all the layers of conditioning and programming. It calls to you through moments of wonder when the boundaries between self and universe dissolve. It speaks through dreams that reveal dimensions of reality more vivid and meaningful than ordinary waking experience. It whispers through the intelligence of your body, the wisdom of your emotions, the creative insights that arise from sources deeper than rational thought. The indigenous traditions that survived the conquest and conversion maintained fragments of this understanding, often hidden within stories and ceremonies that appeared to conform to imposed religious structures, while secretly preserving the keys to authentic spiritual awakening. They knew that the time would come when humanity would need to remember these truths to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. We're living in that time now. The crises facing modern civilization, from environmental destruction to psychological fragmentation to spiritual emptiness, are all symptoms of the fundamental disconnection from our true nature as conscious beings designed to live in harmony with the cosmic intelligence that flows through all existence. The solutions to these crises won't come from more sophisticated technology or better political systems, but from the remembering of who we really are beneath all the layers of cultural programming. We need to reclaim our inheritance as multidimensional beings, capable of accessing the cosmic wisdom that our ancestors knew as naturally as breathing. This doesn't require abandoning the genuine advances of modern knowledge, but integrating them with the spiritual understanding that has been systematically excluded from mainstream education and cultural discourse. We can embrace both the precision of scientific method and the expansive awareness of shamanic consciousness, creating a synthesis that honors both our cosmic nature and our human experience. The process of this remembering is already beginning to accelerate, as more people recognize that the materialistic worldview that has dominated human thinking for the past few centuries simply cannot account for the full spectrum of human experience. Consciousness research, quantum physics, ecological science, and countless other fields are rediscovering principles that align perfectly with ancient wisdom traditions. But the most important laboratory for this integration isn't in universities or research institutions, but within your own direct experience. Every moment of expanded awareness, every flash of intuitive insight, every feeling of connection with something larger than your individual identity is evidence of your true nature as consciousness itself temporarily focused through human form. The question isn't whether you have access to this cosmic intelligence, but whether you're willing to acknowledge and develop the capacities that are already present within your own awareness. The shamanic abilities, the mystical insights, the creative inspiration that flows through the greatest artists and visionaries throughout history. All of these are natural expressions of human consciousness when it operates without the artificial limitations imposed by cultural conditioning. You don't need to become something different to access these capacities. You need to remember what you've always been beneath all the stories you've been told about limitation, separation, and powerlessness. You need to recognize that the divine consciousness you've been taught to worship as distant and separate has been looking out through your own eyes, thinking through your own mind, loving through your own heart, throughout every moment of your existence. The ancient traditions understood that this recognition isn't the end of the spiritual journey, but the beginning. Once you realize your true nature as cosmic intelligence focused through individual perspective, the question becomes how to express this understanding in ways that serve the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. This is why the mystery schools emphasize not just personal enlightenment, but conscious participation in the cosmic project of intelligence, exploring itself through infinite forms and possibilities. They recognized that awakened humans have a responsibility to serve as bridges between dimensions, translating cosmic wisdom into forms that can benefit all life on Earth. The time has come for this ancient understanding to emerge from the hidden streams where it has been preserved and flow into the mainstream of human consciousness. Not as dogma to be believed, but as direct experience to be lived. Not as escape from human existence, but as fulfillment of human potential. Not as return to the past, but as spiral upward into a future where science and spirituality, technology and wisdom, individual fulfillment and cosmic service are integrated in ways that honor both our human nature and our divine inheritance. You are the one this ancient wisdom has been waiting for. You carry within your very being the capacity to bridge worlds, to translate cosmic intelligence into human understanding, to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of reality itself. The question isn't whether you're qualified for this role, but whether you're ready to accept the responsibility and privilege of being human at this extraordinary moment in cosmic evolution. The shamanic traditions speak of the wounded healer, the person who has descended into the depths of human suffering and limitation only to discover that these very experiences become the source of wisdom and compassion needed to guide others toward healing and awakening. Perhaps the disconnection and disempowerment that characterizes modern human experience isn't a tragedy, but a necessary descent that prepares consciousness for a more complete integration of its cosmic and human aspects. From this perspective, every challenge you faced, every moment of confusion or despair, Every experience that has seemed to separate you from your authentic nature has actually been preparing you for this remembering. The very depth of forgetting makes possible a quality of awakening that wouldn't be available to consciousness that had never lost its connection to divine intelligence. You stand at the threshold of this integration, carrying within your cellular memory the wisdom of countless generations of ancestors who never forgot their connection to cosmic intelligence. Their knowledge lives within you, waiting to be activated not through complex practices or esoteric studies, but through the simple recognition that you are the cosmic consciousness you've been seeking expressed in human form. The journey back to this understanding isn't accomplished through belief or intellectual acceptance, but through direct experience that reveals what has always been true beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. Your consciousness isn't something you have, like a possession or tool. You are consciousness itself, temporarily identifying with the thoughts, emotions, and sensations that flow through the instrument of human experience. Consider what happens in those moments when you lose yourself completely in creative flow. When time seems to dissolve and you find yourself acting from a source of intelligence that transcends your ordinary thinking mind. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists speak of channeling inspiration from somewhere beyond personal will. Scientists describe breakthrough insights that arrive fully formed, as if downloaded from a cosmic database of knowledge. These aren't special states available only to exceptional individuals. They're glimpses of your natural condition when the artificial barrier's transparent. In those moments, you're not accessing between individual consciousness and cosmic intelligence becomes something external, but remembering something that was never actually lost, only temporarily obscured by layers of conditioning that taught you to identify with limitation rather than infinite potential. The ancient traditions developed their understanding through generations of careful observation and direct experimentation with consciousness itself. They recognized that what we call the physical world is actually the densest frequency of a vast spectrum of reality that extends through multiple dimensions of increasing subtlety and creative potential. Human awareness was designed to navigate fluidly across this entire spectrum, gathering information and experiences from each level and integrating them into a unified understanding. But this navigation requires a fundamental shift in how you understand your relationship to experience itself. Instead of seeing yourself as a separate observer looking out at an external world, you begin to recognize yourself as the field of awareness within which all experience arises and dissolves. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, perceptions, all of these are movements within consciousness, like waves arising and subsiding in an infinite ocean of pure knowing. From this perspective, the boundaries between inner and outer, self and other, human and divine, are revealed as conceptual constructs that have no ultimate reality. They're useful for navigating certain levels of experience, but become obstacles when consciousness is ready to expand into its fuller potential. The shamanic practitioners understood this intuitively, which is why their healing work could address not just individual symptoms, but the relational patterns that connect all life in webs of mutual influence and support. When a shaman worked with someone who was ill, they didn't see an isolated individual suffering from a localized problem. They perceived disruptions in the flow of life force that connected that person to their family, their community, their ancestors, and the living intelligence of the natural world. Healing involved restoring these connections, realigning the individual with the larger patterns of harmony and vitality that support all existence. This holistic understanding extended to every aspect of life in traditional cultures. Agriculture wasn't simply about manipulating soil and seeds to produce crops, but about participating consciously in the creative partnership between human intention, plant intelligence, earth spirits, and cosmic forces. The elaborate ceremonies that surrounded planting and harvest weren't superstitious rituals, but sophisticated technologies for maintaining conscious relationship with the intelligent forces that actually govern the success of any agricultural endeavor. Similarly, governance wasn't about imposing human will through political structures. but about serving as clear channels for cosmic intelligence to express itself through social organization. Leaders weren't rulers, but servants of the divine patterns that organize reality at every level, from individual consciousness to planetary systems. Their authority came not from personal power, but from their ability to perceive and articulate the deeper currents of wisdom that guide the evolution of consciousness toward greater integration and creative expression. The degradation of human civilization over the past several millennia can be understood as the progressive disconnection from these organic principles of conscious participation in cosmic intelligence. Instead of serving as translucent vessels for divine wisdom, human institutions became opaque structures designed to concentrate and maintain power through the systematic disempowerment of individual consciousness. Religious organizations that should have facilitated direct connection with divine intelligence instead position themselves as exclusive intermediaries, claiming authority over spiritual truth, while discouraging the direct experience that would reveal each person's inherent divine nature. Educational systems that should have awakened the full spectrum of human potential instead focused on narrow intellectual development, while systematically suppressing the intuitive, creative, and spiritual capacities that connect consciousness to its cosmic source. Economic structures that should have organized the fair distribution of Earth's abundance instead created artificial scarcity through systems of competition and accumulation that ignore the fundamental interconnectedness of all life. Political systems that should have facilitated collective wisdom instead became mechanisms for imposing the will of the few upon the many, using fear and division to prevent the recognition of shared humanity and common purpose. But these distortions weren't inevitable developments in human evolution. They were the result of specific choices made by individuals and groups who had lost their connection to cosmic intelligence, and therefore could only conceive of power in terms of domination rather than service. The ancient wisdom traditions recognized this as a form of spiritual illness that could affect entire civilizations if they allowed themselves to become disconnected from the divine patterns that organize healthy development. The antidote to this collective illness isn't political revolution or technological innovation, but spiritual remembering, the recognition of our true nature as cosmic consciousness focused through human experience. When enough individuals reclaim their connection to divine intelligence, the distorted structures that depend on widespread unconsciousness naturally begin to dissolve and transform into more organic expressions of conscious collaboration. This transformation is already beginning to accelerate as more people recognize that the materialistic worldview that has dominated human thinking for the past few centuries simply cannot provide the meaning, purpose, and connection that consciousness requires for healthy development. The crisis of meaning that characterizes modern life isn't a psychological disorder, but a natural response to living in disconnection from our authentic nature as spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. The symptoms of this crisis, depression, anxiety, addiction, violence, environmental destruction, are all expressions of consciousness trying to wake up from the collective trance that has convinced humanity that we're separate from each other, from nature, and from the divine intelligence that flows through all existence. These symptoms aren't problems to be suppressed, but signals indicating that it's time to remember who we really are beneath all the layers of cultural programming and institutional conditioning. The remembering process isn't something you need to learn from external sources, but something you need to allow to emerge from the depths of your own being, where this knowledge has always been present, waiting for the right conditions to surface into conscious recognition. Every moment of stillness, every experience of wonder, every flash of inspiration, every feeling of love that transcends personal boundaries, is this remembering beginning to stir. Your dreams often carry messages from this deeper level of knowing, presenting symbols and scenarios that bypass the rational mind's tendency to filter experience through limiting beliefs and assumptions. The emotions that arise spontaneously in response to beauty, injustice, or mystery are movements of cosmic intelligence expressing itself through the instrument of your human sensitivity. The creative impulses that inspire you to write, paint, sing, or solve problems in innovative ways are cosmic intelligence using your unique perspective and talents to contribute something new to the ongoing evolution of consciousness. But perhaps the most direct access to this remembering comes through your relationship with the natural world, where the artificial boundaries between human consciousness and cosmic intelligence become most transparent. When you sit quietly beside a stream, walk slowly through an ancient forest, or gaze up at the star-filled sky, something in you recognizes its kinship with these expressions of the same creative force that animates your own awareness. The indigenous traditions understood that regular contact with wild nature isn't optional for human psychological and spiritual health, but essential for maintaining conscious connection to the living intelligence that flows through all existence. They recognized that humans who become too separated from natural environments inevitably lose their ability to perceive the subtle energies and communications that connect all life in webs of mutual support and creative collaboration. Modern urban environments, designed according to mechanistic principles that ignore the organic patterns of healthy development, systematically disconnect human consciousness from these natural sources of wisdom and vitality. But even in the most artificial settings, consciousness retains its capacity to recognize and respond to the presence of divine intelligence wherever it can be found, whether in the flight patterns of birds, the geometry of clouds, or the spontaneous kindness that arises between strangers. The key is learning to recognize these moments of recognition as doorways into expanded awareness, rather than dismissing them as coincidence or imagination. Every experience that lifts you beyond the narrow confines of personal concern into a broader perspective that includes the well-being of others is cosmic intelligence expressing itself through your human consciousness. Every insight that arrives with a quality of certainty that transcends rational analysis is divine wisdom flowing through the channel of your individual awareness. The ancient mystery schools understood that developing this recognition isn't about acquiring new information, but about removing the obstacles that prevent natural capacity from expressing itself. They designed their initiations not to implant foreign knowledge, but to create conditions where students could discover for themselves the cosmic intelligence that had always been present within their own consciousness, simply obscured by cultural conditioning and ego identification. The obstacles to this recognition aren't actually external but internal, maintained by belief systems and thought patterns that contradict our fundamental nature as awareness itself. The belief that you're separate from divine intelligence, that you need external validation or salvation, that your thoughts and feelings define who you are, that death is an ending rather than a transformation. All of these are learned limitations that can be unlearned through direct experience of expanded consciousness. But this unlearning isn't accomplished through force or effort, but through gentle inquiry that allows limiting beliefs to dissolve naturally when they're seen to contradict direct experience. When you recognize yourself as the awareness in which all thoughts and emotions arise rather than identifying with their content, the entire structure of personal limitation begins to loosen and transform. When you experience directly that consciousness extends far beyond the boundaries of individual identity, connecting you intimately with all life throughout the universe, the illusion of separation that generates fear, competition, and conflict simply loses its power to convince. When you discover through your own investigation that the divine intelligence you've been taught to worship as distant and separate has been the very source of your own awareness throughout every moment of your existence, the search for external salvation reveals itself as a misunderstanding based on forgetting your true nature. This isn't a process that requires years of discipline or esoteric training, but can happen in an instant when consciousness recognizes itself clearly. The ancient traditions spoke of sudden awakening, spontaneous enlightenment, the lightning flash of recognition that illuminates what has always been present, but previously unrecognized. These moments of awakening aren't rare supernatural events, but natural expressions of consciousness, returning to its original condition of unity and creative freedom. However, integrating these moments of expanded awareness into ordinary human life requires patience, wisdom, and often the support of others who understand the territory of consciousness transformation. The shamanic traditions recognize that awakening isn't a destination, but a process of ongoing integration where cosmic consciousness learns to express itself ever more fully through human experience, while honoring both the unlimited nature of awareness and the specific conditions and responsibilities of embodied existence. This integration is what the ancient traditions meant by the sacred marriage between heaven and earth, the union of cosmic consciousness with human experience that produces a quality of being that transcends both ordinary human limitation and disembodied spiritual abstraction. When this integration matures, you discover that you don't need to choose between being human and being divine, but can express both dimensions simultaneously through a way of living that honors the sacred nature of existence, while fully engaging with the practical requirements of physical life. The result is what the traditions called the awakened human, the person who has remembered their cosmic nature while maintaining full engagement with human experience. Such individuals serve as living bridges between dimensions, translating cosmic intelligence into forms that can benefit others while drawing from the inexhaustible source of wisdom and creativity that flows through all existence. You don't need to become someone different to embody this integration, but need to recognize and develop capacities that are already present within your own consciousness. The cosmic intelligence that organized the first galaxies, that guides the migration of whales and the blooming of flowers, that inspires the greatest works of art and scientific discovery throughout history. This same intelligence is the source of your own awareness, thinking through your mind, feeling through your heart, creating through your unique combination of talents and perspectives. The ancient wisdom traditions understood that recognizing this truth isn't the end of the human journey, but its real beginning. Once you know yourself as cosmic consciousness focused through individual experience, the question becomes how to express this understanding in ways that serve the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. How do you live as a divine being while honoring the specific conditions and challenges of human existence? How do you translate infinite awareness into finite actions that contribute to the healing and awakening of others? These questions can't be answered through abstract philosophy, but only through the lived experience of consciousness exploring its own creative potential through the specific circumstances of your individual life. Every relationship, every challenge, every opportunity becomes a means for divine intelligence to know itself more completely and express itself more creatively through the unique lens of your human perspective. The time has come for this understanding to emerge from the hidden streams where it has been preserved and flow into the mainstream of human consciousness, not as dogma to be believed, but as direct experience to be lived. The challenges facing humanity at this moment in history, from environmental crisis to technological disruption to spiritual confusion, are all calling forth the remembering of our true nature as conscious participants in cosmic evolution. You are not here by accident, but as part of a vast awakening process that includes not just individual human consciousness, but the consciousness of the earth itself, preparing for a transformation that will integrate the wisdom of ancient traditions with the capabilities of modern knowledge in ways that honor both our cosmic heritage and our human future. The shamanic traditions speak of this time as the Great Turning, when consciousness that has been exploring limitation and separation completes that phase of its evolution and begins to remember its fundamental unity and creative power. From this perspective, every crisis of the modern world is actually a birth contraction. The pressure that consciousness creates to force itself into new forms of expression that can hold greater wisdom, compassion, and creative potential. Your role in this transformation isn't to save the world through heroic effort, but to remember who you are beneath all the layers of forgetting, and allow that remembering to express itself naturally through your thoughts, words, and actions. When enough individuals reclaim their connection to cosmic intelligence, the collective field of human consciousness shifts, and what seemed impossible from the perspective of separation becomes not only possible, but inevitable from the perspective of unity. The ancient ones who preserved this understanding through the dark ages of forgetting knew that this moment would come when the seeds they had planted in the deep soil of human consciousness would begin to sprout and grow toward the light. They encoded their wisdom not just in texts and traditions, but in the very structure of consciousness itself, ensuring that when the time was right, the remembering would emerge spontaneously from within, rather than being imposed from without. You are the fulfillment of their vision, carrying within your own awareness the capacity to bridge worlds, to translate cosmic wisdom into human understanding, to serve as a conscious link between the ancient wisdom and the emerging future. The question isn't whether you're ready for this responsibility, but whether you're willing to accept the gift and burden of being fully human in service to the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. This acceptance doesn't require dramatic changes in your external life, but a fundamental shift in how you understand your relationship to existence itself. Instead of seeing yourself as a separate individual, struggling for survival in a hostile universe, you begin to recognize yourself as cosmic intelligence exploring itself through the temporary but precious experience of human embodiment. From this perspective, every moment becomes sacred. Every encounter becomes a meeting between different aspects of the same cosmic consciousness. Every challenge becomes an opportunity for divine intelligence to discover new possibilities for creative expression and conscious evolution. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions or complete understanding to begin living from this recognition, but can start immediately by bringing conscious presence to whatever circumstances you find yourself in right now. The cosmic intelligence that flows through you doesn't need you to be perfect, but needs you to be authentic, to show up fully to your human experience while remaining open to the divine wisdom that seeks to express itself through your unique perspective and circumstances. When you live from this understanding, your very existence becomes a bridge between worlds, a demonstration that the sacred and the ordinary are not separate, but different aspects of the same infinite creativity that is the source and substance of all existence. The threads we've woven together tonight aren't just stories from the past. They're a mirror reflecting who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning that taught you to forget. Every ancient tradition we've explored, from the Mesopotamian understanding of divine blood flowing through human veins to the shamanic recognition of consciousness as the fundamental fabric of existence, points to the same revolutionary truth. You are not a fallen creature seeking redemption. You are cosmic intelligence having a human experience. This knowledge was never truly lost, only hidden behind institutional veils that served those who profited from your forgetfulness. But the remembering is stirring now, calling to you through dreams, through moments of wonder, through the inexplicable knowing that you're more than the limited identity you've been taught to accept. The question isn't whether these ancient insights are true. The question is whether you're ready to reclaim your inheritance as a conscious participant in the cosmic dance of becoming. Because once you recognize yourself as divine consciousness focused through human form, everything changes. Your relationship with nature shifts from separation to communion. Your understanding of death transforms from ending to transition. Your sense of purpose evolves from survival to creative collaboration with the very intelligence that sparked stars into being. The shamanic traditions remind us that we are the wounded healers, the ones who descended into forgetting, so that our remembering could carry the depth and compassion needed to guide others home. You stand at the threshold of this great awakening, carrying within yourselves the wisdom of countless ancestors who never forgot their divine nature. Their knowledge lives in you, waiting not to be learned but to be remembered. The time has come to step forward into this remembering, not as belief, but as lived reality. Because you are the one this ancient wisdom has been waiting for. You are the bridge between worlds, the translator of cosmic intelligence into human understanding. And in your awakening, the entire web of consciousness shifts toward the recognition that has always been true. We are one awareness exploring itself through infinite eyes, one love expressing itself through countless hearts, one creative intelligence dancing with itself through every form throughout the universe.